A Cessna Citation III went down just short of Toluca Airport, Mexico, during what initially looked like a routine approach. We have ADSB data, we have ground video of the final seconds, and we have a lot of questions to ask here. Let's take a look. Let's start with the basics. The aircraft involved is a Cessna 650 Citation III, registration XA Pro. This is a mid-sized business jet that's been in service for decades, typically operated by professional crews and commonly used for regional flights throughout Mexico. It's a capable airplane, and is no stranger to operating in and out of high-elevation airports. On December 15th, the aircraft was flying a domestic route in Mexico, inbound to Toluca International Airport. Toluca itself is not an unusual destination for this type of jet, but it does come with some built-in considerations. The airport sits at a high elevation, which means thinner air, reduced performance margins, and less tolerance for energy mismanagement, especially on approach. None of that is exotic or unexpected, but it's context that always matters once things start to go wrong. Initial reports indicate 10 fatalities on board. Out of respect for those involved and for the investigation, we're not going to speculate about the crew, their experience, or their decision-making beyond what the available evidence actually supports. That information will come later if and when it's released. Weather at the time does not appear to have been extreme. There's no indication so far of convective activity, severe turbulence, or unusual wind events that would immediately explain a loss of control. That doesn't mean weather played no role, but there's nothing obvious here that stands out as a single dominant factor. So at a high level, what we're looking at is a normal flight to a normal destination for this airplane, with no clear warning signs, at least not yet. That's where we need to look at the data. Looking at publicly available ADSB playback, the en route portion of the flight is uneventful. Altitude, ground speed, and track are all stable. There's nothing in the cruise phase or the initial descent that suggests an emergency developing. As the aircraft begins descending toward Toluca, the numbers still look completely normal. Roughly 14 minutes before the final recorded data point, the jet is descending through approximately 21,000 feet with ground speed in the high 400s. That's exactly what you'd expect for a business jet transitioning toward terminal airspace. Over the next several minutes, the descent continues smoothly. Nothing abnormal here. This is what a routine arrival looks like. What stands out is how stable the profile is. There are no abrupt altitude changes, no erratic speed fluctuations, no holding patterns, and no unusual geometry in the track. If you're looking for early warning signs in the ADSB data, there really aren't any. Then we get into the final few minutes. As the aircraft approaches the airport environment, it descends through roughly 10,000 feet. Ground speed is now down into the low 300s. That's still fast for a final approach, but at this distance and altitude, the airplane is likely being vectored or maneuvering for alignment. And this is where things change. Just a couple of kilometers from the runway environment, the ADSB track shows a noticeable left deviation. This is not a gentle course correction, it's abrupt. At the same time, the altitude trend steepens. The airplane begins losing altitude more rapidly than it had been before. That raises an important question. Why would a jet on short final suddenly turn left? Stable approaches are boring. They don't involve sudden geometry changes at low altitude. When that kind of maneuver appears this late in the sequence, it usually means something has already gone wrong. Within seconds of that left deviation, the ADSB signal stops. There's no extended data tail, no recovery, no leveling off. The data simply ends. That doesn't tell us why this happened, but it tells us how quickly the situation deteriorated. And that brings us to the video. When the aircraft first appears in the frame, several things are immediately clear. The airplane is already in a left bank. It is not wings level, and it's not easing into a turn. The nose also appears slightly low relative to the horizon. Just as important is what we don't see. There's no visible smoke, no fire, no debris trail, and no sign of structural breakup. The wings and tail appear intact. As the video continues, the bank angle increases. The aircraft is now clearly in a descending left turn, and visually, the descent rate appears to increase. Still, there's no smoke, no flame, and no obvious external failure. This is where basic aerodynamics helps frame what's happening. As bank angle increases, Lift is no longer acting straight up, it's tilted sideways. To maintain altitude, the airplane needs more lift, which usually means more speed or more angle of attack. At low altitude, during an approach, neither option comes with much margin. Stall speed increases rapidly in a steep bank, and recovery options disappear just as fast. And this does not look like a coordinated maneuver for a circling approach or runway alignment. The geometry is wrong, and the altitude is too low for that kind of correction. Then the situation clearly becomes unrecoverable. The nose drops more aggressively while the aircraft remains heavily banked. The flight path steepens, and the descent rate increases dramatically. The airplane still appears structurally intact but no longer under controlled flight. That combination significant bank plus nose down pitch is consistent with the loss of control. It could involve an accelerated stall, asymmetric thrust, or a control-related issue. But at this stage, the specific trigger matters less than the reality. There is essentially no altitude left to recover. In the final frames, the aircraft is nearly vertical relative to the horizon. Altitude is disappearing rapidly. Seconds later, the airplane passes behind buildings and the impact occurs off-screen. There's no indication of a flare, no wings level correction, and no sign of a controlled, forced landing. This is a steep, uncontrolled descent. Now, it's critical to draw a clear line here. The footage does not show an engine failure. It does not show fire before impact. It does not show structural breakup. It does not show what the pilots were doing inside the cockpit. Any sound captured is unreliable due to distance and compression. From this footage alone, we cannot determine whether this was caused by a mechanical issue, a control problem, or a human factors issue. That requires recorded data and wreckage analysis. What makes this footage especially valuable is how closely it aligns with the ADSB data. Both show the same sequence: a normal approach, followed by a sudden left deviation, and a rapid descent just seconds before everything stops. So, at this stage, what we do know is that this was not a long, drawn-out emergency. It unfolded quickly, close to the airport, and at low altitude. Those are the hardest scenarios to recover from and the hardest accidents to survive. The answers won't come from speculation. They'll come from the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, and a detailed examination of the wreckage. Those will tell investigators whether this was a mechanical issue, an aerodynamic problem, a human factors challenge, or some combination of all three. For now, the data and the video give us a timeline but not a verdict. And as more verified information becomes available, we'll come back to this with a clearer picture of what actually went wrong.